events at our free public library. We're always so grateful for the things that they do, and I want to welcome my guest, part of a program coming up soon. Dr. David Anderson is here. Good to see you. And Bernard Clay, an Affrilachian poet and author of English Lit. Dr. David Anderson is good. We got his book. We'll show that coming up. So it's Tune Into Poetry, Voice, Tradition, and Community.
Yes.
Coming up on Monday.
Yes.
November 1st, 6:30. Again, you all, it is free. It's at the main library. You know where that is, on York Street. So this is kind of a class that you'll be teaching, right?
Absolutely, and it's a class welcome to anybody, and it's more trying to invite people to feel comfortable with poetry, not feel threatened, not feel that it's something that's alien or not part of their lives, and just to give ways of getting into poetry, experiencing it, because poetry is an art form experienced in time. You don't get the whole thing, unlike a statue, say, before you. You don't get the whole thing. You get one line at a time, and you respond to it. And I think a lot of people, when they read poetry, maybe not everybody, people tend to feel threatened.
Do you think?
I think.
What is the threat? That they won't understand it? Maybe that they're not able to do it themselves, and so it's a little foreign?
I think a little foreign, and I think sometimes, particularly with difficult poetry, they feel it's not for them, or it's something about which they may feel shamed, or they feel that it's a quiz, that there's one way of understanding this poem, and I've got to get it right. And
but with
really
all art, though, it's subjective, right?
Absolutely. And you bring your own experience to it, all of your prior knowledge, what books you've read before, what art you know, what culture you know, and it's okay to bring that to the work of art and then just work with it and see what's there. So that's the main reason for the class, is to invite people, to encourage them and trust themselves as they approach poetry, and just sort of go with the flow as they read it. And one of the things I want to talk about, I'm going to allude to Bernard Clay's poetry here.
Right.
Because it's a wonderful example of a poet who has written about personal experience. No poet necessarily completely writes strictly autobiographical material, changes things. But it's always nice to pick up a book in which you recognize, I know that neighborhood in Louisville.
Yeah.
I know the rotunda in the state capitol. I have had that experience going to an art museum, being the only one like myself, and then having a particular experience with the art. His poetry is very, very human. It's very grounded in the specificities of daily life and culture. I think he tries to be accessible, and there's nothing wrong with being difficult.
No, sometimes we need difficult, and sometimes topics are difficult. So, Bernard, you call yourself an Affrilachian poet.
Yes, ma'am.
Define it for us.
Well, it's not about geography, but typically the founder of Affrilachian, Frank X, he said when he looked up Appalachia, it said that it was a white representative of these certain states of the Appalachian Mountains. And so he felt underrepresented there. And so
because there's not as if there are not people that look like us there.
Exactly. And he was like, well, we are here. And so the Affrilachian Poets is about bringing attention, or at least, you know, a conversation about the people who are there, and from an artist perspective. So as a poet, it's my job to document or be a griot, so to speak, of my neighborhood, my city, the things that I see in the school systems that might be a little bit different than what Frank saw in Danville, or what Crystal saw when she went to, you know, UK. So we all represent our different, like, milestones or I guess touch points in Affrilachian, but you know, we all are representing spiritually this area of typically thought to be mountainous region, typically thought to be impoverished, typically thought to be, not a good place. And we're trying to say, like, well, there are black people there, and it's not that bad a place either. There's some good stuff happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I would think just about everywhere there's something good.
Exactly.
And if not, then you can make it good. It seems to me, though, that the spoken word has, and for you all, it's probably always been like this, but I feel just like recently the spoken word has finally become accepted, and people are excited, by it. I think a big, huge turning point was when you had the young lady that just did the inaugural poem.
Yes.
That was, I mean, she went like crazy viral. Yeah. So what is it, do you think that is changing, or do you think anything is changing that makes people say, no, we need to listen to the spoken word?
Go ahead.
Please, no.
Well, I personally think that you're right. It has been like a groundswell or building. Like since the 90s, really, there's been like this drive, and really since the 60s, to be honest, if we go back to the black arts.
Well, if you go, Langston Hughes,
right.
who is one of my favorite old-time poets.
Me too.
Yeah, I just love him. And you go back and you read, but we can understand things, I think, better, even if we've not lived it, if we hear someone that shares it with us.
I think so, and you're touching upon a subject that I want to deal with in the class, which is voice, and listening to alternative voices. And not only that, but the ways in which black writers often, not necessarily, but often have stepped up as spokespeople for communities and explained communities, though I don't feel that your work is sort of lifting a veil. You introduce people, you immerse people in particular kinds of communities. There is a long, you mentioned Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes representing ordinary people, working class people, daily life, bringing popular culture, music into poetry, and in many ways helping people be aware of a particular life, an inner life as well, but inviting people into these communities and realizing, oh, you may think it's like that, but there's all kinds of things going on. And there are all kinds of rich emotions, thoughts, complicated experiences. And you can enter these particular kinds of poems and find them. One of the things I want to mention, I'm not going to monopolize, I promise, but there's a long tradition of West Louisville poetry, going back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. George Marion McClellan, Joseph Seaman Cotter Sr. and Jr. And in many ways, they were representing black aspiration, African-American thought and experience in the 1880s, 1890s, early 20th century. We have continued that throughout the 21st century, and in many ways, what we want to do is lead into a reading where people can meet and hear poetry of contemporary writers who do much the same thing.
Well, we're kind of at the end of our time here, but if you plan on going to the program, they need you to register. There's LFPL, LouisvilleFreePublicLibrary.org/mylibraryu. Bernard, you'll also be teaching a class that will be English Lit, correct?
I'll be doing a reading from my book.
And how can we get your book?
You can go out to Swallow University or Swallow Press. It also presents it, and then my website, www.bernard-clay.com, has a link to where you can buy it. And it's also on Amazon and Carmichael's. And
well, you do want to check it out again at the Free Public Library. It will be November 1st at 6:30 is when it will start, and then November 10th at 6 p.m. at the Weston Library on 10th Street, which was actually the first library ever in the country to allow African Americans to come in and be part of the library system. I thank you all so much.
Thank you for having us.
I appreciate it. And again, the spoken word touching so much in our lives if we let it.